and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video I will be sharing a DevOps roadmap which I followed to learn DevOps. So for me it's almost been like 4 years in DevOps industry, working as a DevOps engineer. So at this point I'm still learning new technologies and tools inside DevOps. Okay. So if you go on Google and search for DevOps roadmap, there is a huge list of tools and technologies that everyone is asking to learn. Okay. But in reality, if you follow a proper methodology in learning DevOps, you don't have to like learn everything. Okay. And one by one, you can complete the main required tools and technologies for DevOps. So I will explain my experience, in what way I learned DevOps, in what way I started like exploring tools and technologies, and how I started implementing. Same way you can also start doing and start learning DevOps. Okay. So this video is going to be useful for beginners as well as people who are already working in DevOps. Okay. So make sure to follow the video till end, and in case you are new on my channel, then give it a like, and you can like click on subscribe button for my efforts. So with that being said, let's get started. Okay, so let's start with version control system, which is the first thing that you should know if you are starting in DevOps. So version control system tool is Git, okay, which is used for maintaining multiple versions of your source code. To clear the confusion between Git, GitHub and GitLab, let me tell you, GitHub and GitLab are certain tool which provides us a certain amount of space for like creating a repository and keeping our source code. Okay, so GitHub and GitLab, they follow Git tool, and Git is like having certain set of commands which is useful for performing different actions on our source code. Okay, source code may exist on remote repository inside GitHub or GitLab, or even in local repository. And when we say that Git is used for maintaining multiple versions of code, so you know that we are creating multiple branches. Okay, and each branch may have different version of code. Okay, so this whole process, managing this whole repository, managing the source code using Git is like a complete version control system. Okay, so how to start learning this? Basically, like you can search on YouTube or Google Git commands. Okay, and start implementing directly by yourself. Just create a free account on GitLab or GitHub and start implementing by like pushing your source code, creating new branches, then merging, pulling, those kind of things. Everything you can implement, and slowly within 1 or 2 days maximum, you will learn all the commands. Okay, so let's move on to the next topic. Okay, so now coming to programming languages. So for me, like my primary programming language is Java, because I learned it in my college and like initial project in my company. So primary skill in programming language is Java, but in case if I'm receiving a request that I need to build a .NET project, that also I can do, because as per DevOps engineer, we are not exactly like writing the code for application, but writing the small piece of code for building the application, which is like very small. So if you are receiving a .NET based project, then you can run the small command, like a very small command, and then you can build the application. Okay, so programming language, I would suggest like whatever programming language you are going with, my suggestion would be Java. Okay, that also like in Java also you should learn basics like OOPS concept and basic programming. Okay, that is enough at this point. Okay, so that also like on YouTube, like tons of tutorials are there which anyone you can follow, whichever is like you can search for Java crash course, and you can like in 2-3 hours you can like learn it enough to like work as a DevOps engineer. Okay, now let's move on to the next topic. So next up we have build tools. Build tools are something like a specific tool which is used for building the application. For example, if you are having Java based project, you will use Maven. So Maven has a basic command like Maven clean install, Maven clean package, Maven compile. So these are the basic commands of a build tool which can be used to perform different actions over the application source code. So my primary tool that I know is like Maven only, because I have mostly worked with Java. But in case if I receive like Node.js based application or like .NET based application, so in that like basics I know, like I need to run npm basic commands and .NET basic commands. So those also, if you don't know, you can just search on Google and run it. But at least one build tool you should be like very fluent. So for me it's Maven. Like I have worked too much with Maven, so I know like Maven properly. So my primary skill for build tool is Maven. So I would also suggest you like learn at least Maven or npm, at least 1 or 2 you should know properly. Okay, So in my experience, like if you are starting with Maven, maximum it will take like 2 to 3 days. Okay, for me it was like 1 to 2 days it took, but in case you are very beginner, then you can start learning. And see, my suggestion to learn anything is like learn little bit but start implementing as soon as possible, because by implementing you learn very easily and very clearly. Okay, so next up we have CICD tools. CICD tools are the like you can say applications which are used for building and deploying an application. Okay, so as of now there are tons of tools in market. For example, Jenkins, Azure DevOps, GitHub Actions, GitLab CI/CD, then like through AWS, then Bamboo, then TeamCity. But these four which I have mentioned here are the most used. Okay, so for me, my primary skill is in Jenkins as well as Azure DevOps. But to understand like how GitHub Actions and GitLab CI/CD works, I actually implemented certain projects just for my learning purpose. Okay, so I did not specifically went to like start learning by like reading something. Instead, since I know like how CI/CD works, so I just started implementing the like building and deploying of an application with GitHub Actions and GitLab CI/CD. Okay, so that is the best way, like whichever one or two, at least one normal DevOps which is like Jenkins, and one cloud DevOps you should know. Cloud DevOps CI/CD tool you should know. So for me it was like Azure DevOps and Jenkins which I have worked most. But to understand like GitHub Actions and GitLab CI/CD, I implemented one or two projects, basic project, not complex, just basic project to understand like how it works. Okay, so this also actually, if you are starting to learn these things, that it might take around like more than a week, I would say. If you are like starting with Jenkins, like in Jenkins there are so many types of jobs, so many options, so many plugins are there. So exploring that, like it will take time. So it will take a lot of time to learn CI/CD tools properly. Okay. So at this point, like, you know, other than DevOps, there is DevSecOps, which is basically extending DevOps with certain security tools. So at this point, there are so many security tools, but 3 of which I have used is Dependency Check, Anchor, and Trivy. So Dependency Check is used for like finding out the known vulnerabilities in your source code. Anchor may be used for scanning like Docker images. Trivy can be used for scanning repository, folders, file system, Docker images, Kubernetes cluster as well. Okay, so these are like not so hard to learn. They are very easy once you start implementing. There are only certain set of commands which you need to know. So in my opinion, if my suggestion, if you need to follow, you can start with Dependency Check and Trivy, because like if you know Trivy, then Anchor task will already be done. Okay, because Trivy even can scan Docker images. So my suggestions was OWASP Dependency Check and Trivy. And like for me it took like, for Trivy it was just 1 day task. It's not very big, only certain list of commands you need to see and you need to know how to install. Okay, for Dependency Check also you just need to know how to implement very small like commands are there to run this. Okay, so if you know this, then you can say okay, I have worked with certain security tools, which is a very good thing. Okay, next we have scripting tool. So for the people who say that there is no coding in DevOps, in case you are like working with proper DevOps, then you should definitely know at least one scripting tool. Okay, so either you can work with Python script or shell script. Okay, but the thing is that in case you want to learn them properly, you need to keep like practicing like with these scripting tools. Okay, because once you stop like implementing or running basic programs, then you will forget even. Okay, so at least one of these scripting language you should know, either shell, Python, or something else. Anyone you should know. Okay, that is going to be quite useful for you. Okay, so usually most people work with Jenkins and other like CI/CD tools, but at this point, since I have also given a lot of interviews, I got to know like everywhere at least they are asking you to have knowledge in at least one cloud platform. Okay, so my primary cloud platform where I work is like Azure Cloud, because I have worked with Azure DevOps and different services on Azure Cloud. Okay, but you can choose any one of them. Both are like quite used in different companies. Okay, So basically, if someone asks you like if you know knowledge, if you have any knowledge on cloud, you can mention different services you have worked with on the cloud. For example, in Azure cloud, I worked with VMs, web apps, then Terraform using Azure DevOps, then Azure Functions, then Logic Apps, Data Factory, Databricks. These are the services which I worked with, and these are like quite useful. So at least like one cloud service you should definitely know for like progressing in DevOps. Okay, so basically let me tell you about my experience. Actually, I switched from Jenkins to cloud DevOps because at this point from what I have seen outside, everywhere it's like the cloud DevOps in like very much demand. Okay, because most of the project outside are moving on cloud. Okay, so you should definitely learn at least one cloud. So next we have IAC, which is infrastructure as code. So basically like when we provision something, for example, when we are creating a VM, let's say we want to create 20 VMs. So every time we cannot go and write like select the specification that RAM should be 8 GB, then memory should be this much and all. It takes so much hectic time. Okay, so to solve those things, like IAC is introduced, in which have two different kind of applications which are most used. There are other applications also, but mostly use is Terraform and Ansible. The difference between them or the way to use them is that if you have provisioning request, then you should definitely go with Terraform. And to learn Terraform, like basically you need to learn different commands of Terraform and implement it on either like Azure or AWS. Okay, that is the best way to learn Terraform. Okay, and Terraform should be preferred if you have like provisioning request, but in case you want to deploy or perform specific other commands on like certain VM or somewhere, then you should always go with Ansible. And if you know about these two tools, then it's like more than enough for IAC. Okay, so for me, like I learned these two tools only, and that also like one or two times if you implement them now, then you will definitely understand how they work. Okay, so as I say always, that you should definitely, once if you are learning something, you should like directly implement it. Then only you understand the proper structure and proper working of that tool. Okay, next up we have one of the most important topic in networking, which even I am still learning now because it's a quite vast topic as well as complex also. So there could be like two ways. One, you could go just with DevOps networking, the normal one, and then you can go with cloud networking. Okay, so before implementing networking parts, as I said, like you should directly implement, but in case of networking, you should learn everything properly. Okay, over YouTube or like Google, but you should learn every topic like TCP, IP addresses, different kinds of IP addresses, how subnets are like working, VPC and everything. Okay, once you learn everything, then only start implementing. But again, like everything you can understand only when you have implemented it properly. Okay, so there are tons of like different channels on networking also on YouTube which you can follow. Okay, now let's move on to the next one. Next one we have Docker and Kubernetes. Okay, so one is like containerization tool, which is Docker, and next one is Kubernetes, which acts like a cluster, deployment cluster, where we will deploy our like containers, and it will be managed by Kubernetes. Okay, so these two are like one of the most important tools that you should definitely know in case you are working with DevOps. And the like proper way to like learn about them is like, first of all, you should understand like Kubernetes detailed architecture, how it works. For Docker, you should know like what exactly is Docker, what is the purpose of Docker, how it works. Okay, but in Kubernetes, first of all, you should know what exactly is Kubernetes and what is the architecture of Kubernetes. Okay, then you should understand what exactly is the use of Kubernetes and Docker, what problem they are solving. Okay, and finally for Docker, you should start implementing just after that using Docker commands. Okay, once you implement different Docker commands like Docker run, then Docker pull, then Docker networking, those things, then you can learn about like Docker volumes also. Docker volumes is also one of the most important topic. Okay, and in Kubernetes, you can directly like start like taking help from YouTube videos. You can start deploying. Even like I have made some videos on both of them, how to work with Docker and Kubernetes and how to like deploy applications using these two. Okay, next up we have some of the other DevOps tools, which are like SonarQube and Nexus repository, which I have worked with. So SonarQube is like code quality check tool, which is used for like figuring out bugs, technical debt, code smell, vulnerabilities in your source code. Okay. And next up we have Nexus repository, so which is like a artifact management tool where we can like deploy our artifact, jar file, war file, pom file, and like node.js based npm files, nugget files. Okay, so those things we can keep in Nexus repository, and later when deployment is required we can fetch it from there and use it in our like Docker image and finally deploy on Kubernetes cluster. So these two tools, like SonarQube is a very easy to use tool which you can learn in 1 or 2 days, but Nexus repository, a proper understanding you need to have like for Nexus. So Nexus may take 3 to 4 days, but once you implement these two, these are like piece of cake. Okay, so their tutorial also for SonarQube, I have already made a video on SonarQube from scratch, how to set up SonarQube and how to perform code quality check. For Nexus repository, you can search on YouTube and follow any of the good video. Okay. Last but not the least, we have monitoring tools for DevOps. Okay, so most used tools are like Prometheus and Grafana, where Prometheus is basically collecting the metrics. Okay, and those metrics can be used by Grafana to create a visual representation. Okay, so basically you can say Prometheus and Grafana can be integrated together to provide us a monitoring output. Okay, so from what I used previously in my previous company, like Prometheus was used as a data source which was collecting data from different tools like Jenkins, GitLab and other things, and Grafana would use that collected data to create a like visual representation in charts format or other formats, graph, charts and other things. And that was like really useful if you want to like monitor a tool, how it is working, like how many jobs are inside Jenkins, how many plugins inside Jenkins. And then if you are using Grafana and Prometheus on GitLab, you can see when was the last commit done, like who committed, who did the last commit, how many repositories are there, and in that way other details you can see. Okay, so this is pretty much like how this is pretty much about the topics which I learned, and this is how I have learned. Like I have just 2 rules for learning DevOps tools: study a little bit and start implementing, because after implementation you will learn more and more. Okay, just by studying like theoretical things you won't get any knowledge, just theoretical. But my suggestion would be learn study little bit but implement more. Like any topic, if you implement one time, like more, everything you will get to know about it. Even you will get to know what kind of errors you will get if you are implementing. Okay, so that's pretty much about today's video, and I hope it was like useful to you. If it was, then give it a like, and if you are new on my channel, then make sure to subscribe. So thanks for watching. Bye bye.